Welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast. Today's entrepreneurs are mental athletes that have to know about the mind and how to keep it fit. Our goal is to increase our resilience against stress and anxiety, optimize our productivity, motivation, and optimism by learning about the human mind through psychology, neuroscience, and human behavior. I'm your host Ozan. I'm a founder who has experienced the challenges of launching and growing a business and a keen student of human behavior over the last 15 years. I'll share with you what I know and learn. Hundreds of impactful, behavior-changing ideas are waiting to be discovered by us. Let's begin now. Emotional debugging checklist. I think this should be the title of this episode. So last night I was ruminating on a negative thought, and it occurred to me there is essentially a checklist that I go through internally whenever I run into a problem, whenever I experience a negative emotion, and it is something that has turned into a sort of a reflex. But it is a reflex that I have developed by training in psychology and trying to understand the human mind for the last 10-15 years. So I thought that would be useful for others, especially entrepreneurs or people who are having a challenge within their business or anywhere in their life. So I would like to share that with you. But before I get into that, let's talk about the first some core principles that will shed some light on this. The first is that there is no way to cancel your emotions, and there shouldn't be. Emotions are central to the way that your brain functions, and in a way, they are more ancient, they are more embedded even than thought. So thought happens mostly, of course these are crude overgeneralizations, but we have to use overly crude generalizations to talk about the brain because it is such a complex thing. But basically, the analytical thought process happens at the prefrontal cortex level, which is at the very top frontal lobe of your brain. But emotions happen deeper down. They are usually at the thalamus. It is closer to the brain stem. So from there, even you can see the analytical processing is an added on layer, it is a much later stage in the evolution. So emotions are more ancient. They're very at the very core of our being. So it is impossible to cancel them. It is not a good idea to cancel them. Try to cancel them. Try to ignore them. And while the emotion you feel at a certain moment is entirely unique, it's entirely yours. Emotions and the types and circumstances they might appear have a certain universal quality about them, and this is mostly because we have adapted to live in similar conditions as humans, and we share a common ancestry. So it makes sense that we share these types of emotions, and we don't individually have different emotions. But this is a good news. It means we can go out, study, and understand these emotions. For example, we all get angry when we have an unmet expectation or when we observe a clear unfairness. So this is the first idea. How do we manage the emotions? We manage the emotions by understanding, first of all, what the emotions are, how strong they manifest themselves, what caused them, and finally, what function they're serving. For example, Seneca is one of the first philosophers to go into in-depth argumentation about why anger happens. And the discovery he makes, a correlation almost he makes, is quite unique. He poses this idea that anger stems from surprise. This is quite unique because hundreds of years later, when we study microexpressions, and microexpressions is a field of study in which the human face, it has 42 miniature muscles, and these are all These muscles usually act in groups. They are called FACS, F-A-C-S. So these face action muscle groups usually go together in groups, and there are 7 main categories of these, and these correspond directly and clearly with emotions. So sadness, for example, almost all of the muscles in the face go down. So the expression "why the long face" comes from there. When we have a smirk, a condescend, there is a visual way to see condescension in someone's face, and it is this lopsided smile. It's not quite a smile, but it's quite a asymmetrical facial expression. Of course, when we see happiness, we see a lot of muscles again being activated, especially around the eyes, not just around the mouth, etc. And these facial micro expressions are quite interesting because they reveal an interesting fact that that double checks Seneca in a way. That is usually the facial expression of both anger and laughter, in that case happiness, start with a certain facial expression of surprise. So this is really interesting. We are first surprised at something, and then that surprise goes in either of 2 directions. It can turn into anger, or it can turn into laughter. So this is interesting, and this is what Seneca said, the Greek philosopher, in a way. When you're not this is the core idea of the Stoics, which Seneca is one of. When you are not surprised against a situation, then that situation itself loses the power to make you angry. So I find this really interesting. So remember, emotions are core raw energy, and our goal is not to cancel them, but to understand them and direct them in a way. So this is a way to start. So these are some of the core ideas that we need to start talking about debugging emotions. A real life example I can share shortly. So a certain amount of tension I was feeling a few nights before, and I'm like, I'm not feeling really comfortable right now. I wonder why that is. And I go through this checklist that I'm gonna share with you now, like the conclusion I have is I actually spent too much time on social media. I mean, I was at such a manic state, and during the whole day, writing hundreds of emails, text messages, talking to more than 20, 25, maybe 30 people, recording stuff, publishing them, streaming, doing all of those. And I was feeling overwhelmed by that. And I said, okay, you know what? Maybe most likely this is the reason why I'm not feeling so good. What I'll do, I'll go out, do 4 tours around the Regent's Park with my bicycle, listen to some audiobook or some music, come back, have something good to eat, put my feet up, watch something that I will enjoy, go to bed, have a full night of sleep, like 8-9 hours, and I'm again back on top. It's not always this simple. Sometimes for me, the result, the final conclusion of that introspection, the emotional debugging is, you know what? I am really fearful about my future. I'm fearful about the fact that I've been working at this for 2 or 3 years, and it's not going to yield any positive result, and this was not the right path for me, type of a rumination. And when that happens, I look at data, I look at other people's stories, I look at I talk to people I trust. I double down on what I know and double check if I'm doing the right thing. And so far, I have always been able to say, okay, I'm on the right path. At least this is the right path for me. So that gave me some sort of comfort and relaxed me. So without further ado, this emotional debugging checklist I'm talking about. The first one is to express the discomfort you're feeling in terms of core emotions. It might be a single strong emotion like fear. or a combination of a few, like fear and anger. So this is the first step in the emotional debugging checklist. The second one is to identify what is this fear of or anger of. Essentially, find the subject of that emotion or what it is directed at. So remember, emotions like fear are survival tools in the tool belt of the nomadic ancestor. In their normal functioning, they're trying to warn you of something. So when you rationally discover the core object of your fear, this alone makes the situation more manageable and gives you back more control, if that makes sense. So identify what this is a fear of or an anger of. And I'm mostly talking about fear and anger here, but this is true for all other emotions, including the positive ones, and I'll talk about that further down the line. So, third item on the emotional debugging checklist. Sometimes the discomfort is a physical and chemical, or exacerbated by a physical and chemical condition. So here we have a checklist within a checklist to check whether this is physically caused or chemically caused. And there are 4 steps that I usually, a very quick checklist. 1, have I done some decent, proper cardio exercise to get my heart rate up in the last 24 hours to balance the blood sugar, hormones, and essentially massage the nervous system. So when you get into an activity like this, there are two facets to the nervous system in the body. One of them is called sympathetic nervous system. The other one is parasympathetic nervous system. And the first one is about activation, and the second one is about deactivation, relaxation, digestion, etc. So did I actually get my parasympathetic nervous system up and running, and did I massage my body in a way that I think that makes sense. So the second one is, have I eaten the right type of healthy and nutritious food, and made sure that I was not dehydrated. So the third one is, have I checked whether I have tired out my dopaminergic system? And the dopaminergic system is the reward center of the body. When in that case, in the real example I gave, too much social media and too much on-screen time usually causes this, because every time you get a like, you get a share, it is that type of a trigger on the dopamine system. So exposure to this without no end for 15 hours, I mean, it is meant to deplete your dopaminergic system. So I checked that as well, and then I check if I slept a solid 8 hours the last time I slept. So if all these are a check, perfect. Then I move on to the next. But if there's something lacking here, it is, I mean, this is unbelievable. But like 50% of the time, this is the core of the problem, and this is important because imagine if your problem was not something of an abstract nature or an emotion, but of a physical and chemical nature, and you spend time trying to solve that. So this makes sure that is not the case. So going back to the emotional debugging checklist, the third one was to check for physical and chemical. The fourth one is to really understand why you're angry. So that to really get dig deep in a way. Okay, so we know that fear is an emotional response, and sometimes it is very easy to find the cause of that fear. For example, let's take a very simple example. Your friend jumped at you behind the door, and this is a clear reason, unless you were expecting this. And I don't know if you should, why you would expect that. But the sudden movement and the sound will startle your sympathetic nervous system, so that's what's going to happen. And the sympathetic nervous system will prepare your body for physical and mental activity. It will make your heart beat faster and stronger, opens your airways, so you can breathe more easily, and put digestion on hold for the time being, because you have other priorities like survival. However, most other times it's not this simple. Even when you have understood what the emotion is, you still have to figure out the cause of that emotion. What are you truly fearful about? What are you truly angry at? What was the surprise there? What turned out to be different about the world than you previously imagined? What did you learn about yourself? So these are some of the questions to go through. And when you dig deep, you will find the true reason behind the anger, fear, or any other negative emotion you have. So here, a quick side note. It's counterintuitive, but it's a good habit to try to do that automatically when you're experiencing positive emotions too. So why to go through this checklist when we are experiencing positive emotions? First, it will help. It will not only help you understand what is contributing to your happiness, so you can seek more of it if you wish to, but also train yourself to more quickly be able to identify the root causes of your emotions. So going back to the core reason of why you have fear. So what is a fear of, or what is an anger of? The reason might be that you're not feeling valued at work, or that you fear for the financial stability of your family. So the first step is to understand, actually get into the real gritty details of why you're feeling that emotion. And the final step, the fifth step, is to come up with a statement that gives a reason to the emotion, such as, I'm feeling a sense of fear about the future because I feel I've spent the last 2 years working on this product, startup, or something that has to do with family, friends, and relationship. And fear it will not ever monetize or bear fruit in any meaningful way. So bear in mind that this is not a perfect sentence, and it will never be a perfect sentence for you. It is always a tentative, work in progress type of a sentence that will have a certain type of a placeholder value until you come up with a better sentence. So each time you dig down, you come up with a sentence, and then you actually go the layers back up to daily life in a way to actually put on hold, to close off that internal introspection. And you have, imagine it is almost like a machine that crunches out. It does the calculations. It really works tirelessly like a steampunk machine. And then you hear the bing sound, and then it comes up with a result. And that result is this sentence. And it is quite costly to run that machine. So you do not keep it running all day long, which means do not spend the whole day thinking about what your emotions are, because it's going to lead to a more difficult mental place. But rather, know that this is a different type of work. But imagine this is like a meeting with yourself. Spend an hour on this, spend 2 or 3 hours on this, but that's it. And try to come up with reason, and then have that sentence that summarizes that end result, which is, I'm feeling a sense of fear about the future because I feel I've spent the 2 years working on this and it's for nothing, type of a thing. And each time you rerun the engine, you'll come up with a better sentence. But be conservative on how often you run that engine. So what you're doing here is helping your brain help you. And this is the most important sentence I will utter in this podcast. So here it goes again. What you're doing here is helping your brain help you. You see the emotions as valuable data. These are valuable data that will help you figure out what's going on both around and inside you. By thinking about the why, how, what, and when, you're bringing up the object of the emotion to your prefrontal cortex, which does all the analytical and logical processing, and which is also the self-aware part of your brain. So now you made more sense of your situation. The emotion won't cease to exist, and it should not. But it's served its purpose. It has given you a signal, and you heard the signal. You helped your brain out. This is very important. And it will help you back with a sense of relief. It will give you back some feeling of control and more peace within. I hope this was useful to you. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.